Okay, we're just having a bit of technical issues today, but we will start very shortly. Okay. So in today's discussion, we are joined by Eleanor Tucker, who's a sharing and gig economy consultant and chair advisory board at Marketplace Risk. She has worked in award-winning advertising agencies as a creative before becoming a freelance features writer for world-renowned media groups such as The Guardian and the BBC. She's passionate about the potential of technology to empower communities. She's also the board of the UK trade body Sharing Economy and Sharing Economy in the UK, and now speaks, writes, and advises on the gig economy and sharing economy. Elle is originally from Oxford and was educated in Edinburgh University, where she lives with her family. So welcome, Elle. It's really good to have you here with us today.
Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Awesome stuff. And we're also joined by Rutendo Nyamuda, who is the founder of Tinzwe Media and host of the In My 20s podcast. Rutendo is a force to be reckoned with within the African media and podcasting space. She has worked across various areas of the entertainment industry, including journalism, TV production, corporate video production, and PR. Her career started as a journalist where she was writing for prominent publications, including LSA, Forbes Africa, CNBC Africa Online, and the Huffington Post. She then worked in TV for the Espresso Morning Show and the Afternoon Express show in SABC3. In addition, she has extensive experience in PR, having worked on projects including the Jazz Festival Gala Dinner, the Durban July Gala Dinner, as well as the Nelson Mandela Centenary T-shirt campaign with the Nelson Mandela Foundation. Rutendo served as the president of the Ernst & Young Toastmasters Club for 2019 and the 2020 season. And she was also recognized as one of the top 10 Toastmasters speakers in the SADC region for 2019 and 2018. And in 2019, Rutendo launched a company, Tinzwe Media, a podcast production company that produces the Biz Communities, Biz Takeouts podcast, the In My 20s podcast, as well as the podcast sessions. And in 2020, she was featured on the prestigious Mail and Guardian 200 Young South Africans list for her work in the podcasting industry. Welcome, Rutendo.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Awesome stuff. And then we are still waiting on Melilizwe. He hasn't joined us here today. Let me just see. He hasn't joined us today. But in any case, we will continue, and as soon as he's able to join us, he can join us. Then we're also going to be joined by Melilizwe Gqobo, who is the co-founder of Hubspace, Khayelitsha, and program manager at Westerwelle Foundation. He has 10 years experience building social businesses and startup ecosystems in emerging markets. And after relocating to Switzerland in 2015 for his studies, he's now based in Berlin, exploring avenues to foster collaboration between European and African startups. He's a father, husband, brother, and son, and you can find him jogging, taking meditative walks, or having fun in the playground with his kids. Cool. So we all know that innovation often pushes us to do more and creates more. And over the years, doing more has often been associated with sound leadership and organizational success. Resources such as access to funding opportunities are becoming scarcer, and collaboration and doing less is now becoming the norm. So while some social enterprises and nonprofits might see this as a constraint and as a bottleneck, Collaboration or the sharing economy and frugal innovation creates more socio-economic values for organizations. And today we ask the question from our panelists: how can businesses and ecosystems adopt frugal innovation and collaborative strategies to increase sustainability? But before we get into the nitty-gritty of today's topic, I would like to kickstart today's discussion with an open question rather to the panel. And I'd like to ask each of you to tell us more about your organization, what kind of products and services you provide, and how customers can benefit from your services, and just a bit more about your business model. Rutendo, I can start with you.
Okay, fantastic. So I'm Rutendo Nyamuda. The company I run is called Tinzwe Media. And it initially actually, before it became a company, it obviously, as a lot of people's concepts do, start off as an idea. The concept for the company actually started when I was retrenched. So for anyone who's going through a difficult time right now in the middle of the pandemic, I would kind of like urge you to just think about, you might be in a difficult space, but what would you create if money wasn't an issue, if finances wasn't an issue? Because that's the space I was in. I had nothing. So I was just like, what is my dream career? And it kind of mapped out the plans for Tinzwe Media. That was 2017, January. My first podcast only launched in August of the same year, called Inside Once Out. And from there, the idea of a podcast company started developing, essentially the kind of company that I'd started when I was retrenched. So essentially what we do at the moment is now we've grown from that to having a few divisions. We've got podcasting, so we produce our own internal podcasts. We help clients launch their own podcast. So it could be anything from pre-production, production to post-production. We kind of help you along the way. With the podcasting side as well, we also do some training. We have our own training wing where we do public speaking training, people who just want to learn better skills. So presentation skills training, public speaking training, podcast training as well. We've got some PR that we do. We've started doing corporate videos for clients. And then my favorite division and wing is the Podcast Sessions digital magazine. What we found within the industry was everyone has been operating in silos, but there's this beautiful podcasting African bubble or podcasting network that is starting to grow and develop. And we really wanted to connect people, but also have people have a mirror held up to them and kind of see themselves being portrayed in articles, in publications, on the covers of magazines. It doesn't just stop with, the world that we think magazines lie in, but rather the space where we can actually say to people, you can aspire to be on the cover of this podcast magazine too, because that's what it's all about. So we're basically all about like connecting people and helping people use their voices to kind of inspire the world as well.
Awesome stuff. Great stuff. And Elle?
I love what Rutendo said there about, about connecting people, because, I think it's, I think it underpins something that we're going to be talking about throughout the hour today. And the way that technology can do that via the sharing economy is one of the things that attracted me to that world in the first place. Because if it was just about technology, then, that's one thing. But the fact that it's technology that can empower people and help us move to a more sustainable way of living and working, and to encourage human connection as well. That was really what attracted me in the first place. You've given me a lovely introduction there, Nelly, and I think that that journey through journalism and advertising led me into the sharing economy world. And this was the world of the kind of, the Airbnb the kind of Airbnb platform style, where you're listing an asset that you already have and sharing it with somebody. And obviously sharing in that sense often means that you're renting it out, but it's an underutilized asset and you're giving it a chance for somebody else to use it. And Airbnb sort of became the poster child of the sharing economy for good reasons, but often, there are criticisms of that type of model as well. Mm-hmm. Anyway, what I do now really is help similar types of model company to launch, and I help them with their messaging, and I help them with their business model at the beginning. And the companies that I'm connected with now as a consultant are Sharing Economy UK, which is the UK trade body for this type of company. And I also work with Marketplace Risk, as you've said in your intro, which is a platform to support marketplace models, these sort of peer-to-peer models, to get through their trust and safety issues, etc. And we work globally. So I can kind of help companies to understand, how to get the message across and how to get in the media, things like that. So similarities to what Rutendo is doing, but very much specifically in that peer-to-peer sharing economy space. And alongside the sharing economy goes the gig economy, which sometimes people people think of Uber, but really that's about skill sharing. So they do sit alongside each other. So we'll get into that, I'm sure, in more detail. But that's what I do, and I don't think there's many people operating in this specifically in this space. So it's a real pleasure, and it's a pleasure to get to speak to people in different countries about what they're doing. And I love the term frugal innovation that you've got in the title as well, because I haven't come across that in the UK. So I'm certainly going to steal that and take it home, if that's okay.
Great stuff. Like from Rutendo and as well as you are, like, I'm hearing a lot of you guys are speaking about sharing and helping, and connecting people, as you mentioned, out to different sort of resources. Rutendo, you spoke about how you help people so that they can see themselves, not help, but how you have this platform and you feature these people's stories where they can also see themselves, on a platform such as yours. And I'm very interested, and I know that both of you also work in a very sort of collaborative sense. You make use of, different resources, different people and stuff, and everything sort of comes together. How would you define collaboration, and why do you feel like collaboration is important more so in this particular business in this landscape and your respective industries as well? Rutendo, I can start with you.
So it's a really, really great question in terms of collaboration. I think particularly where we find ourselves in the global economy in the middle of a pandemic. What I think has been, I don't want to say necessarily say positive, but innovative within this kind of space that we all find ourselves is we're not just sharing connections and collaborating within our own countries or within our own cities. Now we're doing things cross-border, we're doing things internationally. I've had the opportunity in this pandemic to speak at two global summits, which I don't think would have happened before. But when we're talking about collaboration, you're also just getting the opportunity to be in the room with other people, like-minded people, or people who you can learn from or glean wisdom from, but who are also looking at things from a different perspective. And then coming particularly to collaboration, I think one of the interesting things that I found, even looking at the magazine and even with podcasting itself, is sometimes there's this fear of, I don't want to reach out because I don't think I either have the money or the skill sets, or there's this fear that will hold people back. And what I found through pushing through those boundaries is that there are people out there who actually want to collaborate with you. You actually just need to ask. And for every 10 people who might say, no, this is not for me, there'll be 2 that will say yes, and possibly 1 that you'll actually end up collaborating with either now or in the future. But you actually have to ask. Like, don't take every single no as a rejection. You've got to find a way to move forward. So I'll use the magazine as a prime example. I'm in the media space. I think a lot of us might be in the media space, and we know that people in the media space are either often undercharged for their skill sets. They're doing thousands of things. You're not just a writer. You're a writer, and then you become the social media person, then you become the business development person. And before you know it, you're an account manager, and you're like, what is my actual title? So you end up becoming like a jack of all trades. And some people often feel like their companies are using them. Others feel like, they never get to actually harness one skill set. So there's also this fear of, I don't want to be used for my skill set. So even with the magazine, I kind of was like, I'm a creative myself, and if someone came to me and said, do you want to write for free? Because we didn't have the budget, and still, budget is one of the big things that we're struggling with at the moment. But if someone said, would you like to contribute to this platform, from this publication for free, but you can get your, name at the on a byline, like, would one do it? And I initially thought, like, who's going to want to write for free? Like, honestly, in this world, like, who doesn't want to get paid? And so the collaboration and putting myself out there was reaching out to people, either podcasters or writers with an interest in podcasting. And I said, I mean, obviously, like, I was holding fingers and really like fearful that people would say no. And I just put it out there. And I said, like, looking for writers to contribute to this platform who would be keen. And so many people came through and so many people were supportive. And if they couldn't actually write, they were like, why don't you, have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about reaching out to this person? So that was really, really, really nice. Collaboration doesn't always necessarily mean that there's a monetary exchange. Sometimes it's a skills exchange. Sometimes, I mean, you can't trade exchange your way to paying your salary, don't get me wrong. But I do think in the early stages of collaborating, mutual beneficial connections, people who you're like, cool, maybe we won't be able to pay you now, but in the future, let's see what it looks like. And then I will say, when you get to the point where you can pay people, or don't be afraid to ask people, like, this is what I usually would charge. Be open and willing to negotiate, especially in spaces like podcasting that are still growing, that are still developing, that we still don't know what the space looks like. I think people just should be open-minded and approach things unfearfully.
Cool. Yeah. Before I get into you, Alan, just sort of getting into your perspective on this, there's just an interesting question that just came up from one of our attendees, and Kim would like to know. And I think it also ties in the beginning of the session. You spoke about how it was in the middle of a pandemic, and you sort of decided you're going to start this podcasting platform, and you sort of mapped it out, and you didn't have any money, you didn't have any funding, and you just sort of came up with this idea, and that really speaks to, for me, it makes me think a lot about frugal innovation and innovating when you don't have much resources. So she would just like to know how do you start a podcast media business, and were you able to do this in a frugal way, or where did you even get your funding?
My funding is myself. That's how it started off. To be very honest, that's how one starts off. So I didn't start the company. I had the concept for the company when I was retrenched, because I obviously had no money at the time. When I did get a job, which was in February of that year, I kind of put money aside. I know it's very difficult to save, at times, but I kind of was putting money aside, and I was just like, I'm going to get podcast equipment. And that's literally how I started. My background is not in any audio thing related, by the way. Everything I've learned, I've either researched, I've done short courses for, I've done free short courses, by the way. I've done YouTube stuff or self-taught. So with my equipment, I was kind of like, you can't just spend money and not start something, start it. So I just started recording. And if you listen to my very first couple of In My 20s episodes, which was my first podcast, you'll hear horrible audio. You'll hear a lot of noise. You'll hear maybe not the greatest structure, but you know what? I did it. And I thought it was the best thing ever until I started learning about like noise reduction, audio editing, compression, EQing sound, recording in the right spaces, which only comes by doing it. I will put it this way, like to use an analogy, if you're in the middle of a dark path, or you're on a dark road and the road is going straight, and you literally just have a candle or a torch with you, you cannot shine the light and see the end. You kind of shine the light and you can only see the ground in front of you. So the ground in front of you would be, in this podcast sense, or creating a podcast company or business, shine the light, which is, what knowledge do I have right now? Okay, let me step forward into that knowledge. Okay, what knowledge don't I have? Shine the light, figure out what you don't have. Who can I connect with? Who can I call? Who can I email? So you're never going to see the end, but I feel a lot of people stop when they think too big. They think, oh my word, my competitors. Oh my word, I could never do that. Oh my word, I don't have money. When I started podcasting, to be very honest, I was recording after hours and editing at 3 a.m. in the morning. That was my cycle, because obviously I had a full 9-to-5 job. So really, you've just got to start where you are, but don't think that it's bigger than... It could become big, but you actually just have to start. That's the only way forward.
Great stuff. And Al, what do you have do you have any insights to share on collaboration, and how would you define it, and why you feel it's
I love what Rutendo said there. I think it's so true, and it is that kind of, you would get a sense of overwhelm if you did try and imagine that. And when I set up a communications agency, nearly half a decade ago, specialising in the sharing economy in the UK, with my co-founder. We, a lot of people didn't even know what the sharing economy was. And I think if we'd had these global ambitions at that point, it would have just been too much. But what we did was we just kept reaching out and making these connections and thinking, just as Rutendo said, who can I call? Who can I speak to? And we just started to discover that all around the world, there were people who were interested in this kind of, technology that powers sustainability and innovation. And people were doing it in different ways, and they might be calling it different things, but all around the world were bubbles popping up of like-minded people, and just by taking steps down that tunnel, and one step at a time, and reaching out to people and having conversations, whether or not they were at strange times of day, as many of them were because of time zones, but just starting to build that. By doing that, this sense of collaboration started to come through, and we realized that there were lots of like-minded people who were interested in this way of working. And it was almost like a kind of new wave that was coming through. And, as somebody that worked in, offices and businesses in the 1990s, I could see a real shift, that people weren't doing that kind of like, this is my homework, you're not looking at it. They were saying, this is what we're doing. What are you doing? And what can we learn from that? And, how can we, make the world a better place by sharing our ideas rather than just making money for ourselves? And that seems to be a bit of a seed change now, that I'm seeing. And this idea that sort of collaboration is the way forward. And, of course it is, in a time of a global crisis. The only way we're going to get out of this is if we work together, definitely.
100%. And I think you speak about, drawing on various people's resources and calling up different people, and, just sort of asking and putting yourself out there, as Rutendo also mentioned. And I also watched a video this morning, and it was sort of speaking, I think it was a TED Talk or something. They were speaking about the sharing economy. And is the sharing economy even the right term? Because there's so many ways that it's defined. I know there's a sharing economy, there's a peer-to-peer economy. Can you just maybe shed some light on that?
I'll give you a kind of definition as I see it. I know that there are lots of discussions around these definitions, but if we think in terms of platforms, online platforms, and obviously these are the websites that you can go on and actually sort of interact with by setting up a profile. We're all used to that these days. So you can get gaming platforms, streaming platforms, all these sorts of things where you log in and you're a user. That's platforms. Mm-hmm. Within that, there are marketplaces, and these are ones where you exchange goods or services. And then within that, there are types of marketplaces that are called peer-to-peer marketplaces. So rather than say like Amazon is a company that's selling to you via a marketplace, this is about individuals, and this is the peer-to-peer thing. And the sharing economy is a peer-to-peer transaction where the item is returned in some way or only used temporarily, and in that way it's making use of an underutilized asset. And obviously we go back to Airbnb because that's the example that everyone knows, but if you think about what you can share, it would tend to be probably something reasonably high value that you might not want to use all the time. And once you start to think in terms of that definition, wow, I mean, you can share practically anything. So you can share the dresses in your wardrobe, your handbag, your camper van, your car. You can share, your driveway. You can share, all these things that we sort of take for granted that we have ownership of. I think that trend of ownership is dying, and people are more keen to, borrow a power drill from their neighbor, or to, earn some money by renting out their car when it's sitting there on their driveway. And by doing that, less stuff is being produced. So, we're making use of the stuff that we already have. So I think that is really a kind of definition that I stick to of the sharing economy. It's about a peer-to-peer transaction of something, where the item is returned to the original owner and rented out again, probably. And then obviously, the gig economy sits alongside that, and that's the services part of that.
I see.
If that makes it a bit clearer.
Yeah, no, 100%. And so would you say that, so from a perspective of a sharing and gig economy consultant, what would you say is the current sort of state of the sharing economy? If you were just to sort of cast an
Well,
overview of it.
yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one because a lot of people might think that the sharing economy is a sector, whereas of course it's a business model, is
Mm,
a way that a business can transact, and that spans so many sectors. So we have sort of sharing economy for travel, and obviously that's the whole Airbnb thing that we've talked about. And then you have shared mobility, which could be car sharing, or people are very familiar with sort of electric scooters, bike sharing, that type of model. And then you've got the future of work, which is the gig economy, and that's a different thing. And then you've got asset sharing, which is anything from fashion rental to sharing out the possessions in your home. And some of these areas have been really suffering because of pandemic, and obviously travel is one of them. Whereas actually there are other types of sharing economy that have been really thriving. Gig work has been, deliveries, people obviously staying at home, and also people have been looking for ways to live more sustainably and make money out of the things they own already. So actually fashion rental, even though we've been staying at home, we've been sitting on our Zoom calls and we want a nice top, but do we want that, top forever? No, maybe we just want it this week. So people have been, exploring these types of things. And also people have been, using their phones and their computers a lot more because we're all at home and we've got used to doing virtual events like this, working online, getting stuff delivered, these types of things. Our kids are maybe homeschooling online. So people are more inclined to explore online platforms, and the sharing economy is part of that. So certainly seen a lot of growth in some areas, and others have obviously suffered a bit as well. But I think that the nature of peer-to-peer transactions and the fact that it empowers two individuals rather than a business will really help that business model to prevail as we come out of the pandemic.
mm-hmm. So just one more question to you, Al. With frugal innovation and the sharing economy, it also means that it's all about being smarter with our resources. As you mentioned, that with the pandemic, we've also had to sort of learn how to use our resources wisely. And also that also applies, I feel, to the sharing economy and frugal innovation, so that we're able to tackle big global challenges and with low cost innovation. And also, can you speak to us a bit about disrupting how these new innovations are disrupting traditional ways of doing business? And what do you think is sort of next, if there is anything that's, any trends that you're foreseeing within the sharing economy space?
Yeah. Because I think it's interesting because people think that participation in the sharing economy is perhaps something that you would do as an individual,
Mm,
but it's certainly not. I think businesses can certainly explore ways to engage with this type of model. And again, the frugal innovation thing is, I love that definition because I think that businesses can certainly be part of that. So, I mean, for businesses, what we're seeing is that, say, they are adopting models where they can maybe rent out, if they were normally a retail company, they can maybe switch to a rental model for part of that offering. But also, if they're not a retail model, maybe sort of, I don't know, services or manufacturing or something like that, businesses can get involved in the sharing economy because all businesses have, well, most businesses have assets. And I think that making use of your business assets is one way for a business to, get really involved in the sharing economy. From a sustainability point of view, there's a huge benefit there. And, for actually being able to create a cost effective extra income stream for their business too. So when you think about, we have anything from I don't know, a healthcare company or a office or something, there's lots of equipment involved in these types of companies, but they don't necessarily use it all the time. So what we're seeing is companies like, I don't know, or even organizations, government organizations, you think of a university, how many chairs they've got or something like that. These are things that they can rent out and make use of. It's better for other businesses to borrow things that they only need temporarily, the business can make money from renting them out and less stuff has to be produced. So it's about keeping stuff in the value chain, sharing it around and creating benefits for everyone. So to me, the potential for businesses to get involved in the sharing economy is huge, and I think that this type of innovation is something we're going to see more and more, because a lot of people have been almost forced into trying it because of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Businesses, have been at breaking point. What can they do to bring in extra revenue? But they're going to keep doing that afterwards. I don't think people are going to go back once they've explored ways to get involved.
Great. Rutendo, I'd like to bring you into this discussion as well. As a media personality and someone who, is very involved in the media and podcasting space. And we have seen that podcasts are on the rise, and it's also fueling interest in programming that better suits the needs of the individual and sort of moving away from mainstream media. I would like to know if you can share some insights of how you have managed to use sharing economy principles and frugal innovation principles, with the influx of all these technologies and products and services that are now coming out, and how that has influenced your business model.
Definitely. Just a quick thing. I don't know if it's my connection on my side. If it freezes at any time, just do let me know. But yeah, definitely let me know. Before I answer your question, I do want to just touch on what Elle said, which is quite interesting. So when I started my company, I started making use of a co-working space, which has been very interesting, which I think is quite an innovative way. Co-working spaces have been around for some time, but in terms of, not a lot of people need an office environment, an office space 24/7. So being able to come into a space where you rent a desk for a day, or you have a monthly, hourly thing where you can come in and out, has been very, very useful, especially in the pandemic times, when we went down from like lockdown level 5 to like, even coming out of that, that intense lockdown period to now where we can, sort of kind of move around and be in the office spaces, obviously with a limited amount of people. It's been really good to just get out of that mindset of like, I'm just at home. So that I think has been very, very innovative. And then just also another thing, just even when it comes to, again, the shared economy, particularly looking at podcasts, is podcasters have equipment, and it's something that we're starting to move into, which is like, come into our space, you can rent our equipment. It can be quite pricey, so we have really good equipment, and we have the space for you to record. So come through, record it. We can, if you want to rent our services or, use our services so we can edit and produce it for you, that's what we do. Which has been really, really interesting for us to even look into. So as Elle said, it's kind of like also just looking at what you have and what you can kind of put out there and just say, I'm willing to put this out there. I'm sure someone will need it. And it's the simplest things as well. And then to answer your question, which has slipped my mind a little bit, can you just repeat the last part of the question again?
So I'm basically asking you, so how you have used so everything. So as have you heard, like I was speaking about, different technologies and, all the principles of the sharing economy. So I would like to know from you if you could share like your insights of how you have managed to remain agile and sort of adapt to new products and services that is now, coming to the forefront within like your space, and how you've managed to sort of work around that.
So I think one of the biggest things that I've always asked throughout, so as you mentioned at the start of my career, like I have moved in various spaces. And for me, the thing is, and don't take my word on this, anyone, but as soon as I feel like I know something too well or it becomes comfortable, I kind of shift and move. And that's kind of also been one of the big things that I've done within my company. So it's like I started a podcast, having one podcast, I get it, I'm in the routine. How do I shift and move it now? How do I build on that? So how do I manage 2 podcasts? How do I manage 3 podcasts? How do I host an external podcast, have some podcasts, and have one person freelancing for me? So it's always been like, how does one shift and move? Particularly in the podcast space, what we saw one of the big gaps were, and that's why we launched the magazine, was what are we not seeing? Everyone's going to have a podcast. So at the end of the day, in 5 years' time, I'm not going to lie, every second person you talk to will probably have a podcast, or someone, their best friend will have a podcast. We're not going to get away from the podcast space. It's quite interesting. People will ask you for your I mean, what you do for a living and the name of your podcast. So if you don't have one already, start thinking about launching one. But what we couldn't find and what we weren't seeing is what is the collaborative nature of it. So now we have a magazine, and that's kind of our new shift in how we've innovated and looking at the space. The next question is, once we're comfortable with the magazine, we'll ask ourselves again, it's just the space that we're always in. What is the next thing? I can't tell you that right now because, you know, tomorrow I'll wake up and someone will be like, I've done the thing. But we're always looking at what is the next thing and how do you innovate? Someone once told me that you need to also just be careful of the timelines that you plan your things, because you'll wake up tomorrow and someone's already created it. So if you have an idea, if you have a concept, don't be afraid to start, launch, run through with it, because oftentimes you hold on to things for like 3-4 years, just waiting for the right time or waiting for the right, you know, moment to innovate, and you don't, and you're like, oh, I've just missed my opportunity. I don't really believe in missed opportunities, but there are just ways to better it. And then don't be afraid of looking at your competitors. That's the other thing. We're always looking at, well, competitors. We're always looking at people in our space to see what they're doing, which is important. And I call it healthy competition. So don't look at them and be like, oh my word, they're in the space was just for me. Oh my word. A perfect example is the YouTube beauty space. There are so many beauty YouTubers, and yet I promise you tomorrow, there'll be another new 10 beauty YouTubers, and they will do incredibly well because people are, I mean, I watch beauty YouTubers as well. People are always looking for that kind of content. So whatever it is you want to create, don't think like, oh my word, I can't innovate in that way, or I can't create in that way because someone else has done it. There is always space for more. Like there's always space for your voice, especially in podcasting. There is someone who can create a carbon copy of every single podcast I've ever created, but by virtue of their voice being different, how they approach questions being different, their landscape, their perspective on life, etc., will be different. The podcast will be different. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, 100%. I'd just like to say hi, Melilizwe. Thank you for joining us.
I must sincerely apologize. Seriously, I was really challenged by the technical errors. So yeah, but I listened in a little bit. But, yeah, I'm here now. So apologies for that. And yeah, hello to everybody in the call, in the conversation, and yeah, look forward to engaging for the 20 minutes left over.
Well, thank you for joining us. We were just, speaking about, on the topic of today, which is the sharing economy and frugal innovation. We were just listening to Rutendo and Al, where they were sharing their insights about the sharing economy, and just sort of unpacking, what the definitions around it, the importance of collaboration, and how it sort of is playing out in the current economic climate that we're finding ourselves in. And I would just like to invite you into the conversation as well, because we've missed you. And if you could just maybe tell us about more about your work that you do, products and services that you offer, or any work that you're involved in, and how customers can benefit from your services, and a bit about the business model of your organization. So just a bit more about what you do in your work.
Gladly, thank you. So I'm currently involved right now with the Westerwelle Foundation, and essentially what we do, we try to really seek for founders around the world, specifically in emerging markets, specifically looking at Latin America, Southeast Asia, and Africa. And what we do is that we run 2 startup houses based in Rwanda, Kigali, and one in Tunisia and Tunis. And then we run also a remote program where we invite founders from around the world. We essentially invite them to Berlin, and they have a week, and then after that they follow up with a 6-month mentoring program that is run remotely. But at the moment we're doing everything digitally. Actually, we're hosting the kickoff conference next week from Monday till Friday. And essentially in terms of the products and services, yeah, for me, first and foremost, I'm just a startup enthusiast. I think, there's nothing more important than being able to like really get up and be able to like figure out and like have a knack of figuring out and looking into a challenge and really solving it as much as you can. And linking it to the topic at hand with regards to frugal innovation. And what I believe is that, we live in a world whereby we need to really ask, either simple questions or really, really hard questions. And for me, when one has the ability to really craft a question, it really leads you on a journey to be able to really figure out what you don't know. And then through that, you then have the ability to really break out whatever you didn't know and break that down into small, concrete fundamentals which will then drive you to be able to really create the most simplest, but at the same time, the most impactful products and solutions. And how we do that from our side is that we really have managed to tap into quite a substantial ecosystem of entrepreneurs that we always really seeking them as a guidance in terms of how do we develop our programs.
Mm-hmm.
I think from my personal perspective, in terms of the little bit of work that I've done within that space and trying to see how to implement ideas and plans with the little that you have, I always believe that at this point in time, emerging markets and people coming from limited resource communities, I actually have a leg up in terms of being able to really plug in and be able to really bring in solutions that are probably new to the space, because one has to consider first and foremost that you are so limited in resources, but at the same time, there's so much opportunity out there. And the question is, it really becomes about access, right? And that's why for me that it has always really been important to see how things have really shifted. We started off with globalization, about 15 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. And then we moved into the digital space, right? And now I feel like where we're heading towards is more the space around, the dispersion, where everything is really actually coming to you rather than you actually going to the things, the products and services that you develop. And so what we do also within the organization and what I do personally for myself is to really always geek out as to what is really going on in the different spaces that I'm involved in, and really maintain that beginner's mindset so that you actually, like, sometimes it's okay to be an idiot and ask those simple questions like, what is an SOP? But, and really, because, you'll find out in most situations that half of the people that are in that space or in that room also don't know. And when you ask that question, you're really opening up an opportunity for people to learn. So I think, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I'm just really passionate about really having that curious mindset, the beginner's mindset. And then I think that really leads you to really have the potential to actually start coming up with innovative ideas, or also not so innovative ideas, but like necessary ideas and plans that can actually really benefit from time.
I like what you're saying there, because that's also a point that Rutendo alluded to, and she was speaking about, and I like what you said about maintaining a beginner's mindset and putting yourself out there and sometimes looking for these opportunities and just putting yourself in the space and sort of learning what is happening around you, which is something that Rutendo spoke about in depth when she spoke about going out there and putting yourself out there, and we also spoke about collaboration and how you can basically leverage on the different resources and things that you have at your disposal, and bringing all of those resources together so that you can build something meaningful. So I would just like to pose a final question to everyone here today. And I would like to just speak about, and Romeli, if you can share your insights on this topic as well. So from an entrepreneurship perspective, but also from females in entrepreneurship as well. How do you think women are well positioned to increase sustainability, or not even women only, but also how should we basically position ourselves as organizations and businesses to increase sustainability and innovation within our communities? Elle, I can start with you.
Okay, I'm going to think about that question. I don't know if Rutendo wanted to had more immediate thoughts, but it's an interesting one, and I would probably need to have a think about that for a second, if that's okay.
Okay, perfect. Rutendo?
So I think it's really interesting depending on how you're approaching. It is quite a large question, but how you're approaching it. So from my perspective, I'm coming in from a media background with no business knowledge and no business background. So there are a number of steps that I would naturally need to take before I even started thinking about sustainability. Sustainability and businesses and that sustainability also comes in the opportunities that you know about, not the opportunities that are there, because that's one thing. It's the opportunities that you know about are something different. I am always surprised every time I hear about someone who's just gotten, and very happy for them, by the way, who's gotten a new grant funding opportunity or funding into their businesses, because I'm like, I didn't know about that. And if I knew about it, I would have applied for it. And that would help with the sustainability side of any woman-funded led businesses. So I think that's a starting point is the funding could be there, the grant work could be there, all of the stuff that one needs to create a sustainable and well-funded business could be there. I just don't know a lot of people who know enough about these opportunities. So not necessarily always on our side to say like, cool, there's a new opportunity, go and apply for it. But the people who are putting these opportunities out and who want to give away the money and all of that stuff, that's the starting point. Before you can even talk about the levels, it's just like, do we even know about, are there even those opportunities there? And then looking at where the access is. So are those opportunities available in South Africa? Are those opportunities available on the African continent? Are those opportunities, now that I need to know who is the funder in a European or an American or an Asian market, to now even go there? So I think it's really complex. It's an issue that I grapple with every single day, especially as a new business owner. And I know the stats on, businesses that fail in the first couple of months or the first couple of years. Funding is a massive thing. So it's kind of just being able to have access to those opportunities and then knowledge of those opportunities as well.
Mm-hmm. And Melly?
And I would add to that, Nelly, that I think that diversity of all types in the C-suite, on the boards of companies, can only help when it comes to sustainability, simply because you are getting, a broader range of ideas, a broader range of views. Mm-hmm. So, diversity in itself will breed better ideas, and that's every kind of diversity. And, better ideas will help us to be able to find solutions. And so, from the point of view of having more women on the board, and all different, types of, diversity that are present on boards, these companies will be able to come through with a better range of ideas, because people have different life experiences and people are coming to an issue and a problem with a broader range of ideas. So I think that is definitely part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, I would echo what has been said. I'll just take maybe a little bit of an input that I received a couple of years ago from a very powerful person that, not powerful, but like really meaningful person that I really worked with. And what she had mentioned to me is that one thing that we need to acknowledge right now, there's a very, very clear shift in terms of just like leadership and just like social structures, where we're moving from the masculine to the feminine side of things, because it's always been driven by masculinity, right? Just the world in general. And that stuck with me because I think she said this to me literally about 3 years ago. And then I really kept a close eye on it as to, okay, cool, what is my contribution towards it, and how do I actually contribute to that narrative itself? And up until I had a kid, so I have 2 daughters, and then I realized, oh my word, how hurt are we as men in terms of just like from a mindset and from an emotional perspective to not understand that, to really not have an understanding on that side. And I think for me, with regards to the question that you posed, Nelly, is that I think it really requires a lot of work. I know it sounds very like up in the pie kind of situation, but it really requires people to do a lot of inner work within themselves from both parties, both from the masculine, from the feminine side of things, mm-hmm. but mostly from the masculine side of things, because we have this tendency, or at least I could include myself and put myself in the pot, that in the fire, that it's really we don't know, and we need to be able to have the ability to really just have a curious mindset to understand, how do we do this? And we could look it up. We could look at it into policies. We could look at this into being able to set up quotas. But I think that does not really help the situation. I think what really helps the situation or aids the process would be to really understand the value that what everybody brings into the table, and being able to understand and seeing how that actually comes into fruition. Through, whether it be through ideas, whether it be through, just, general inputs in terms of whatever we're doing. And I think it's been proven time and time and again that actually, you come to realize that, women are actually not probably better leaders than men. And we've seen it now in this pandemic as to how certain organizations and countries that are actually driven by women have actually really dealt with the situation pretty well. I like to take the example of what's going on in Finland, where you've just recently had, the prime minister and the president who are females. And what you look, if you see how progressive and around the corner Finland is in terms of moving things, and these are women that are literally not older than 40 years old. And if you look at on the other side of the fence and you look at the other leaders from a male perspective, it's just pure ego, and I think that really requires a lot of work, and I'm doing my own work to see how I can be able to contribute to that, being able to understand that. And I think from a practical standpoint, in terms of the programs that we run, I try to make sure that there's definitely an equal representation in terms of whether it be gender, race, backgrounds, and everything. So yeah, I think in summation, it's going to require a lot of reconstruction and a lot of restructuring for a lot of people to really to understand that this is very important, and it's no longer a topic that's going to be a trend, but it's actually something that is needed by society and humanity. And if we don't, we pretty much, excuse my French, but we fucked, So yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much for your insights, guys. And before we open up for Q&A, because that's almost what that we have. We're almost running out of time. And I just would like to thank you for your contribution to today's NPO Grow series. So what I have learned today, as we spoke about, and just to sort of recap and my personal reflection, we spoke about the power of collaboration and why collaboration, especially in the times that we are living in, why it's so important. Elle, when you spoke about, you also shared your insights about sharing ideas, and that is one of the ways that we can position ourselves to, build more sustainable businesses and ecosystems. And also, Rutendo, when you spoke about putting yourself out there, not having any resources, just being retrenched from your work and not having pretty much a plan and access to funding, and how you've managed to build your brand in the way that you did. So that was very inspiring for me. And also, Melilizwe, when you spoke about equal representation and how more space should be allowed for women, to sit in high level positions, to be able to make, the different changes and things that we need. That is definitely something that I took away from today's session. So I would just like to open up for a quick Q&A. If anyone has any questions, please do feel free to post them in the chat, and we will answer them. So we have a question here by Candace, and it's not really posed to anyone, so I guess I'll just open the question to the panel, and perhaps if you can think about a moment when you either in your journey, and she would like to know, how do you practically deal with imposter syndrome? Rutendo, I assuming, I have a feeling this question is sort of directed to you when you started out in your journey. So if you could answer that question.
Thank you so much for the question. From my perspective, it never goes away. Imposter syndrome is something that has continuously popped up. And I tell you why. It's because every time you kind of move to a new level of your career, or you get promoted, or you're in a new space, it's going to feel new. It's going to feel unfamiliar. And so you are going to have these moments of like, what am I doing here? Did I make the right decision? Why did they choose me? Do I even know what I'm doing? But you're in that space to kind of like fill the room or fill the shoes that you've been put in. So there's going to be growth moments. They're going to be painful moments. And that's where those imposter syndromes are going to crop up. And then one day you're going to wake up and you'll be like, oh my word, I really know how to do the skill set. But then something else is going to come. Whether it's personal or in a work setting, you're always going to feel an imposter in some sort of way, I think. It hasn't left me, to be very honest. And so that's my my feedback on the question.
Cool. And Melilizwe, you work with quite a number of entrepreneurs as well. How do you deal with imposter syndrome? What are some stories that you've heard, or any insights that you might have on that?
Yeah, for me, I'll really, connect it again to just like an age that we went through, which is the industrial age, where you were where essentially people were told to believe and made to believe that, there was the phrase, fake it till you make it. And that really became a thing, that really became a mindset, and that's how people built characters around it. And it's funny how that from that, because you needed to have the ability to say, look, I have the ability to do this, but you don't. And I think within the space, I think within the entrepreneurship space, it's very much common. It's very much common to, because this whole idea of being an entrepreneur and a founder is so glorified. And a lot of people tend to want to be able to, meet that standard. And by meeting that standard, they sacrifice themselves as to who they really are. I think for me, there's nothing more important. I've got a lot of, great teachers that I really learn from. And one of them is Sean Carter, which is Jay-Z. And I remember him pointing out that, there's nothing more beautiful walking into a space and walking into a room and just like being you, like being yourself, and like being proud of who you are. And he says that in any situation, whether it be he's talking to the coffee person or he's talking to the whoever of the company, he just shows up as himself. And I think this is something that I'm trying to embody, that I always try to really reiterate and also share with people, like, there's only one you, and what's the point of just like trying to compromise on that person, because then you don't really show up into the world as and bring in the gifts and the value that you bring into, that you have the potential to really bring into a conversation. So I think there's nothing more important just like showing up and and just like being yourself, and I try to reiterate that to myself and other people as much as I can.
Cool, thank you. Al, do you have any insights?
I agree with that about faking, because although I realize that expression has helped people along the way, I really agree with the fact that if you do that, then you are setting yourself up to be something that's to be a person that's not being authentic, and exactly how great to walk into the room and know that you can. Not only you can be yourself, but by being yourself, you're going to perform in the best way, and I think that's brilliant. But I would also say about imposter syndrome is that it's about reframing. I mean, imposter syndrome sounds horrible. I mean, the word imposter sounds like you've got someone who's broken into your living room. It's syndrome sounds like an illness. So I would say don't call it that. And going back to what Rutendo said, think of it as it's a growth moment, isn't it? And you've got to feel that discomfort to move forward. So maybe just try and think of it in a different way. And if you do feel that you're not meant to be somewhere, then think of it as it's a sort of first time feeling rather than an imposter syndrome feeling, because that you just even sort of trick your brain into think of it in a more positive way, I think can help. And that's certainly the technique that I use.
I think that is a beautiful way to end off today's discussion, especially, in this time where we are sort of trying to find new ways of doing many things. And it's really good to know, that to also start reframing, and the moment we feel that discomfort, to just understand that we're doing something for the first time, and sort of how we can sort of look at that. So unfortunately, that's all we have had time for today. I'd like to thank everyone on the panel for joining us. Thank you so much. And also to everyone who attended today's session. I've personally learned and taken away so much from today's session. And thank you to everyone again for giving us your time and attention. Please do keep an eye out on our social media platforms for further information about upcoming webinars, and everything will be shared on our social media platforms. So do give us a follow at Kwela Women with an X on all social media platforms. And thank you so much for joining us. It's been great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.